Hey guys, so in this video we're gonna go over how you can make this procedural rain effect. As you can see, the particles are affecting the material of the other object, the Suzanne monkey. So let's quickly go over the node tree. Here first we just are instancing points on a plane. Here as you can see, I'm just giving these points random location on the z-axis, and then I am inside the simulation nodes. I am merging, or not merging, adding the geometry of the points each frame to the simulation. Here I'm just making the points fall along the negative z-axis, so they fall like rain. Next, we're gonna go over how you can make the raindrops behave like water and stick to surfaces. And to do that, you take the geometry of the object you want them to stick on, and you take the position of the points. You connect them to a geometry proximity node, and you take the distance, and you make the distance control the strength of the vector that the points need to move on to stick on the surface. You get that vector by taking the position output of the geometry proximity and subtracting the point's position. And you add that to the original position. You'll get the points that stick to a surface when they are near it. If you don't understand all this, don't be worried, I'll explain in length. After deleting everything, add a Suzanne monkey, rotate it in the edit mode so you can automatically apply the rotation. Add a new geometry node setup. Now you want to add a grid. Now you want to distribute points on faces and connect the grid to a simulation node, input and output. You need to connect the points you just distributed on faces using joint geometry into the simulation node. So every frame it adds new points. So it keeps adding points. Every frame it's adding a new points. The points you just distributed, it's adding them to the geometry. So you don't run out of rain droplets. As you can see, I'm now adding a joint geometry. Let me just move this over, expand this, and what you want to do really is set position. Use the set position node, and you want a combine XYZ to control only on the z-axis, so make them only appear in random locations on the z-axis. You can also do X and Y, but I mean, why would you bother? Make this negative 0.2 and 0.2 or 0.3, it doesn't really matter. You can control the seed by the frame, so every frame it's instance new points, and they have random location on the z-axis. They also have random location on their instance on the grid. That means they are random on the X and Y and on the Z, but only in the limits of the grid. And they don't go over the grid on the X and Y, but they do on the Z. Now you want to add a transform node and move your rain object up. When you play the simulation, you can see it's just adding points on random locations. Right now our rain is going nowhere, so we're gonna add a set position node, and you want to set the value to a negative small value. So each frame it moves the points on the z value on the negative z value. So each frame the rain moves down, and the next frame it's instancing new points and moving them down, so it looks like rain. When adding your timeline, expand it a little bit, add 1,000 frame or something like that. You want to restart your animation. So now it looks like rain. You just drop the intensity, or the, what do you call it, the how many points controller slider thingy. So now our rain is almost finished. Now we need the geometry of the Suzanne to actually make them stick to it. If they want to stick to it, they need the geometry. So join the geometry of the Suzanne after the simulation. Let me just move this up. Doesn't want to move. Okay. Anytime now. So now after all that finished, you need a capture attribute to capture the position of your Suzanne, and you also want to capture the position of your points. Set both of these to vector and connect position to both of them. So add a node, position, add a node, position, and now you need the geometry of the Suzanne and connect it to a geometry proximity node. As you can see now, the position isn't reading anything because I need to connect the position of the points, not the position of the Suzanne. Now I'm trying different things. The see which one work, of course they're all not gonna work. Need the geometry of the Suzanne and the position of the points. Now when you restart your animation, you'll see nothing because you need to set the geometry proximity to points instead of faces. So now, of course it doesn't work because I didn't connect this position. So it doesn't get any position. Now as you can see, the points that are closer to the geometry of the Suzanne, they get dark values. So the distance between them is near 0 or even 0. So you want to flip this value and you really want to decrease it. So make it like 0.2 or 0.3. That will ensure that only the points that are actually touching or closer to the surface, they are the points who are actually gonna stick to the surface. As you can see, trying different values to see what fits. You want to see your geometry. You want to see this like I'm seeing a monkey inside the rain, white monkey. You can see that, that's a good sign. Now you want to take the position output of the geometry proximity and subtract the original position of the points. Let me just make this fashionable. Now this will tell the points to move to the surface of your geometry or your monkey Suzanne. But to do that, you need to subtract the position of the point from the position output of the geometry proximity. You need to normalize that vector and you need to scale it. As you can see, I set the math node to add instead of subtract. And I've added a scale node and it doesn't work. Add a normalize. You just click N and it will normalize the vector. Now it doesn't work properly because I'm adding. You need to set this to subtract. You see, as soon as I set it, the points stick to the surface. When you set it to a positive, the points will move away from the surface. So it's basically an arrow from the points pointing to the surface. If it's a positive value, it will be from the surface to the points and it will move the points away from the location of the surface. So now you can control this thing by the distance. So the points that get affected are only the points that are closer to the surface. So connect that to a math node and connect it to the distance. You need to set the math node to a negative value. Let me just replay this, see what we're getting. It doesn't work at the moment. You need to forget about normalizing the vector. Now you want to play with the distance. Let's just find something that works. So 0.2 to negative 0.1 or 0.2 seems to do it. You can add a value to control this node later. It basically controls how sticky the surface is. Now after that you can see it works. Looks nicely actually. One more thing. I should subdivide the surface and set shade smooth. So the more you subdivide, the more you get vertices, the more you have geometry, the more information you can store on that geometry. That will later be helpful because we're gonna store the distance from the points on the surface of the monkey Suzanne. So now let's just take a quick look at it. Is it working properly? May need some adjustments. You can totally adjust that later. As you can see, I'm trying to adjust it to work well better. Not liking it at the moment. It's too uniform. You can add a random value or a noise texture in here. Make the variation really small to make some of the points stick and some they don't stick very well. And now let's go over how we can use these points to point on the surface, or like a wet map if you can call it that. To do that, you use a second simulation node and you calculate the distance from the point to the surface and you store it on the surface. And for each frame, you store the distance. And for the next frame, you add that distance to the previous distance you recorded, so you get a trail, like the trail a droplet would leave on a geometry or a surface in real life. And to do that is pretty simple. Just connect a new simulation to your Suzanne monkey, and you want to capture the position of your Suzanne, or the position of the vertices or the points of the Suzanne geometry to be exact. You want to add a capture node and connect it to a position node. Now you want to add a reroute and connect a geometry proximity. Don't forget to set your geometry proximity to points instead of faces. We're basically going to use the distance. As you can see, it's already working. So now these black points are where the distance is really close to 0. So the point is really close to the surface, so the distance between them is almost 0. And to make this look like rain trails, we are going to make a new attribute. So add a store name attribute node, and you want to name your attribute. Let's just name it wet. You want to connect this attribute to itself. So that means for the next frame, it takes the wet part of the previous frame and add to it any new wet part. So the particle would be moved one frame. So we want to add that movement to get a trail. So as you can tell now, the resolution of this trail we're getting, it depends on two things: the speed of the movement of the point and the surface geometry that we're storing that information on. Now you want to flip your distance so it's white when the points are close. I don't know, I just like white mask. You can make it black if you want, it's just the same thing. I'm not racist or anything, I just like my mask white. Anyway, adding more subdivision to the subdivide surface node, lags your computer but makes your resolution of the wet attributes more, I don't know what you call it. It will make it have more resolution, basically. So now let me this line is really bugging me. Let's preview this and reset the animation and it works. You can see it's chopping because I'm not using too much geometry. I'm only subdividing the Suzanne 2 times because I don't have a monster PC. So now let's just make this easier to look at. I'm gonna move this over, add a reroute here. I really love reroutes. And reset the animation, go to shading, add a new material. Remember that you have to add the material. Add a set material node, set your material, go back to shading. Once you're at shading, go to material preview, set studio light, and use the scene light. I don't have any lights in the scene, no camera, no nothing, just the Suzanne. Add your attribute, name it wet, preview the attribute, and it works. Usually it doesn't work at first, I don't know. Every time I use an attribute in the shading workspace, it just doesn't work. Either the name is wrong, or I'm storing it on the wrong geometry, or for whatever reason. It never works on first try. This is my third try recording. So anyway, you can use the mask, the wet mask we've just made, to control any combination of two materials you like. I'll just speedrun this while I make the two materials. They're nothing really. Just one of them is emissive and the other is regular white material. And I'm using a wet mask to mix between them using a mix shader node. Well, you can also use one material and make it emissive using the mask. So I make the mask control the emission or the emission strength of the material, so it's only emissive when the mask is applied. It means when the rain droplets hit. So you wanna go back and let's demonstrate what you just made. So the Suzanne, it works. If you delete the Suzanne and add a sphere, it works even better. You want to delete your sphere. And at this point, you can also add geometry to your points. So you instance point on geometry, but you can instance cubes or whatever you want instead of the points. Now I'm adding a cylinder and I'm just giving it more geometry. As you can see, when you're using low geometry, just watch this, it doesn't record properly. Add the geometry, replay the animation, now it records properly. So it's very dependent on the geometry that you have, which is a drawback. I wish there was a way. If you know a way, just tell me. I need this. So right now the tutorial is officially done. You can leave if you want. You can just watch me try different geometry sets to see what will break it. Well, if it breaks, if it breaks is not really a word. If it breaks, then we can fix it if it breaks. Let's see. So as you can see, the torus needs more geometry. Nothing my PC can't handle, or nothing it can handle. Now go back to geometry nodes. Let me show you which values you need to control if you're controlling this. So let's go back to this. You need to control the values on this to control the stickiness, and control the values of this to control how sensitive it is to points. So it will sense them if they're far. We control this, the speed of the points. I'm going to control this. You can change the grid to any object you want, and you want to control the density of the points. You want to also control the subdivision. And lastly, well, there is no lastly. That's all. If you need more help or you just want to chat, join my Discord. It's in the description. See ya.